There are different reasons for refugee men to leave their home and migrate to places like Europe. Some are looking for better social and economic opportunities. Others flee persecution, conflict, violence, and war. But the journey itself is dangerous too. Migrants and refugees may not know just how bad it can be. Their will to find a better life is stronger than the fear of dangers. One danger that refugees face on their journey is sexual violence. We know that women and girls are most likely to be affected, but people of any gender identity or sexual orientation may experience sexual violence in many different settings. This short film serves the purpose of raising awareness towards sexual violence against male refugees who travel through Libya to Europe. Despite the dangers, many migrants decide to take the journey. Departing from North Africa, many migrants and refugees use what is known as the Central Mediterranean route. On this journey, they transit through Libya to cross the Mediterranean Sea by boat and reach Europe. Generally, the vast majority of people traveling this route through Libya are men and boys. In 2020, around 93% of people traveling this route were men and young boys. Many unaccompanied boys travel by themselves because they want to find a job or earn enough money to send home to their families. Some of the refugees and migrants are taking the journey hoping to face peace, safety, and security. Families sometimes travel with their kids and young babies, hoping to give them a good future. Others are fighting for a better future for themselves. The young boys traveling this route may dream of becoming a football star, a police officer, or a fireman in Europe. Every single person on this journey has dreams just like we do, and they are taking this journey to pursue their dreams, whatever they may be. The situation in Libya is very difficult and complex. Libya has been in conflict since 2011. Armed hostilities increased in 2014 and again in 2019. Since 2019, Libya has been witnessing a security, governance, and humanitarian crisis. Libya's descent into chaos has severely hampered the functioning of the justice system. Libya is unable to adequately address human rights violations and abuses, as the International Organization of Migration said.
The ongoing conflict in Libya led to a humanitarian crisis that is strongly affecting displaced populations within Libya and migrants present in the country.
Migrants and refugees face abuses on every step of their journey through Libya. Reports and research has shown that militias, armed groups, and local officials are responsible for the violence. Even some members of the government, including staff of Ministry of Interior and Ministry of Defense, cooperate with smugglers and human traffickers. A refugee who was kept in one of the camps says,
"I saw the hell with my eyes. Despite your hunger and your problems, don't come to Libya."
It is very difficult and dangerous for refugees and migrants to travel through Libya. Libya has no national asylum system or law. For this reason, people without official documents are not allowed to enter or stay in the country. Often, when they are found by the police, border patrol agents, or others, men and boys without official documents are brought into detention centers. The Libyan Coast Guard regularly stops boats that are trying to cross the Mediterranean to reach Europe and then brings the refugees back to one of the detention centers. The majority of refugee men and boys often have to stay in such centers for years without being able to contact anyone. Officially, detention centers are run by the Department to Combat Irregular Migration, which is controlled by Libya's Ministry of Interior. Unofficially, many of the centers are run by the members of armed groups that have gained control of the territories where the centers are located. Conditions in the centers vary. In general, they are inhumane and do not meet international standards. They are often places of great torture. Different reports describe severe overcrowding, lack of proper ventilation and lighting, malnutrition, denial of contact with the outside world, constant confinement, and inadequate medical treatment. Nagusa, an Eritrean refugee, spoke out about the situation in the detention centers.
They are not human. I've seen 3 or 4 people die every day from starvation, dehydration, illness, and scabies. I've seen their skin fall off. They tortured us to force us to pay. I've seen it with my own eyes. I don't wish it upon anybody.
Guards commit torture, forced labor, and sexual violence on a daily basis. Reports say that most of the inmates have suffered from sexual violence during detention in Libya. Migrants have reported being forced to call family members to ask for money and that guards punish them if they are not able to pay. A detainee from Libya testified to the Women's Refugee Commission in 2019 that
when they talk about hell, to me Libya is hell. They burn you in your private parts. If your family doesn't pay, they will torture you and videotape it.
We are about to describe some of the violence in graphic detail. Common forms of sexual violence inside the camps include terrible reports of men being forced to rape other men, anal and oral rape, forced rape of corpses, castration, and even forced incest. Another common form of sexual violence is genital violence, including burning, electroshocking, beating, tying and pulling off the penis and scrotum of the migrants to torture them. Men in these centers have reported that if they move, speak out, or try to escape, then they are often beaten, tortured, or killed. A service provider in Italy told researchers from the Women's Refugee Commission,
"We heard stories that men and boys are raped by their captors in detention or by other detainees. One guy told us that in the detention center, if someone tried to escape, then all the other men in the room are forced to have sex with this person. Otherwise, they will kill him. We heard that many times. We heard that men are forced to have sex with other men, with other detainees, and with guards themselves."
One of the most common destinations for refugees and migrants passing through Libya is Italy, as the first point to get into Europe. The Women's Refugee Commission reports that almost all refugees arriving in Italy report some form of ill treatment in Libya. Sexual violence is one of the most common forms of violence. While this sexual violence is mostly committed in detention centers, it can also happen throughout the rest of their journey, including in the desert, on the way to Libya, or at checkpoints along the way, and even in the host country. A young man from West Africa who was quoted by the Women's Refugee Commission said the following:
"We are forced to do things because we need money. We only get 75 euros per month from the government, and it's not enough. I had a friend near Teramo. There was a man who gave him 1,000 euros to come to his home and sleep with his wife. The man filmed this.
The exact magnitude of sexual violence committed against migrants and refugees, especially against men and boys, stays unclear. We know that this is common for women and girls. Men and boys are often unable to talk about what has happened to them and what they have witnessed, but there are some survivors who did speak out and share their horrific experiences. We would like to share an example with you from the Women's Refugee Commission. In the following, a health worker describes his patient's experience in a detention center in Libya.
He was in Beni Walid, in one of the unofficial places of captivity. He described the sexual violence. He had never seen or heard of anything like it in his life. Guards had so many people in the holding place, and they had a lot of people who weren't worth anything anymore. They couldn't extort them anymore. So they would initiate a cleaning out, saying it's time to clean the prison and have a bath. They would line up all the men and women naked. Everyone had to strip. And the men and women were in different lines. The women had to masturbate the men. They were forced to do everything to make the men erect. If the man became erect, the guards would cut their penis off. If there was no erection, they would rape the woman with a stick. He said that no woman survived that. They'd rape her until she bled to death. They would do this on a semi-regular basis to reduce numbers.
After arriving in Europe with lots of hopes and ambitions, there are many new challenges that these men and boys have to face. The language barrier is a common issue that, accompanied by other factors, makes integration into the host country very difficult. Learning the language poses a huge barrier, especially for those who were illiterate in their home country. This language problem is also one of the reasons that many survivors don't seek help. One of the biggest challenges is that they simply don't understand where and how they can access services. The men and boys who experience sexual violence can have numerous very severe impacts from the violence, including psychological and physical trauma, social humiliation, and it may even increase their financial hardship. Like women and girls, many men and boys who are survivors of sexual violence suffer in silence and isolate themselves. They often experience feelings of extreme shame, guilt, hopelessness, and anger. For some, confusion of sexual and gender identity occurs. Psychological consequences they deal with are suicide and suicidal thoughts, PTSD, depression, anxiety, and trouble sleeping. A young refugee quoted by the Women's Refugee Commission says,
"My story is very painful. I seem to be okay. People think I'm funny and happy, but I must smoke marijuana to sleep. I can't sleep, I can't be alone, I can't stop thinking about things, especially my future in Italy."
Different types of sexual violence can result in a number of physical effects and include erectile trauma, anal fistulas, and fissures that cause significant pain. Victims may also suffer fecal leakage that needs specialized surgery for recovery. Other reported health effects are sexually transmitted infections and sexual dysfunction, including impotency, broke bones that didn't heal well, bullets in their bodies, bruises, cuts, and scars. Boy survivors are at risk for further abuse or harassment. Other research has linked boyhood sexual abuse with high-risk sexual behavior, including sex work in adolescence and adulthood. Survivors may also face shaming and persecution. Also, they worry about not being believed. Male survivors, whose story becomes known to the community, may experience stigmatization. For this reason, it is extremely important that the men and boys trust the service providers. They need to be assured that if they share the experience, it will be kept confidential. Another huge issue is that men who have been sexually abused sometimes fear being less respected as men. Homophobic views that are still very present in society all around the world worsen the discrimination that male survivors face. Homophobic people see being gay as a bad thing. Therefore, men who have been raped by other men are in some cases afraid of being seen gay because this could lead to discrimination. Similarly, some survivors are afraid to be seen as less masculine after being raped. Some even blame themselves for not being able to defend themselves. Those fears are strengthened by people who have mistaken beliefs on gender and masculinities. For example, people who think that men raped by other men are gay, or that men need to be strong enough to defend themselves. Sexual violence can affect anyone. People with any gender can be victimized. Those kind of beliefs are not only wrong, but also extremely harmful. Experiencing sexual violence can also lead to financial hardships for men and boys. Some male survivors may experience injuries that make it difficult to work. The violence may occur at work, and they may still be at risk and afraid to return. Much of the work available to refugees is physical labor. For example, men and boys doing construction or agricultural labor have to lift heavy loads and spend long hours on their feet. But this type of work may be impossible for people with rectal trauma and other physical injuries. After eliminating parts of the horrific experiences and consequences of sexual violence, we are left with the following question. What can be done to help survivors of sexual violence? Because of the many severe impacts of sexual violence, it is very important that survivors have access to help and specialized services wherever they are in Europe. Those services need to be respectful, confidential, and survivor-centered. Health services can be extremely important to help survivors disclose their experiences. Unfortunately, there are a lot of cultural and logistical barriers for survivors to access these services. The men and boys and women and girls who come to Europe often don't know what their rights are to accessing services. Additionally, they may not know where to find them. For refugees who are not registered, it is even more difficult to get the help that they need. Another issue is that the survivors sometimes mistrust healthcare service providers. For minors, it legally shouldn't matter whether they are documented. They have a right to see a pediatrician. But some healthcare professionals refuse to care for undocumented migrants because they don't know or don't care. Some providers even show a negative attitude towards survivors. In those cases, they sometimes don't believe the men and boys, or believe in myths such as men can't be raped. This often discourages survivors from seeking help. Victim blaming also poses an immense obstacle and is unfortunately very prevalent. Another obstacle for them to get help is that they are often ashamed, fear stigmatization, and are scared of breaking religious beliefs that condemn same-sex activity. Lastly, there is a basic service uptake challenge because the needs for help simply can't be met. Of 231 refugees and migrants who transited through Libya to Tunisia in 2018, 83% disclosed experiencing violence or abuse, such as torture and sexual violence, in Libya. A young refugee who has made it to Italy said,
It is so widespread. Everyone knows when a man says, "I've gone through Libya," it is a euphemism for rape.
The numbers are high and the consequences are severe. However, we can take steps to reduce some of the negative consequences for men and boys arriving in Europe. The first important step is to break the silence that surrounds crimes of sexual violence in Libya and all over the world. Sexual violence is perpetrated in many different settings. Even in the most developed countries, no one is safe from being victimized. In our video, we focused on Libya, but the problem does not start or end there. So many people are dealing with those consequences, and we should do everything we can to help them. Stigmatization of survivors of all genders needs to stop. One important step is to raise awareness and to educate ourselves about this topic. People have to approach the issue of sexual violence in an open-minded way. No one should ever blame survivors or excuse perpetrators. If you want to learn more about sexual violence against migrants, A great place to start is reading about the topic. Many interesting publications can be found here. We want to thank you for taking the time to watch our short film. We're trying to make people more conscious about the devastating issues we addressed and hope to have encouraged you to participate in bringing change.